Looking for a smarter way to manage dispatch and logistics? Check out Basis, the cloud-based platform built by truckers for truckers. Since 2020, Basis has been helping carriers, shippers, and receivers cut manual work, digitize workflows, and streamline communications, increasing profit margins for everyone. From intermodal to bulk freight, their tools bring to the surface insights that eliminate waste and create efficiency. Put your data to work for you and take your operations to the next level with Basis. Learn more at basis.io.
Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations.
Hey, KP, what's up?
Hey, man. Welcome back to another episode of Kev Talks. I have my fall flannel on.
Same here, bro.
We talk about fall the last couple episodes and how much we wanted fall weather. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
It was in the 40s this morning. So,
dude,
welcome fall.
It was cold Sunday night. We went to a concert at the Momentary and sat outside. It was like 42 degrees, and we're like, yeah, it's cold.
It's October now. It definitely is fall.
It hit hard.
We're talking about it, and it finally is here, which I'm glad.
Well, what's happening in the real world?
Yeah, so we always talk about Northwest Arkansas, and it's not Halloween yet, so I'll hold off on Halloween discussions. However, in Northwest Arkansas, I got to ask you, Higgins, have you ever gone to the Eureka Springs zombie crawl? There's a zombie
but that's
crawl.
this weekend, isn't it?
It is this weekend.
I'm going to miss it. I've always wanted to go.
I have too, and it falls into the category, we've talked about the mule jump in Pea Ridge. Yeah. I wanted to go to it for years, and my wife and I a couple of years ago finally went to it. Yeah. I'm now putting this on the list, and you and I need to go, and maybe Kev Talks goes. I don't know. We can do a live, but it's so... I'm a big Walking Dead fan, and the fact that Eureka Springs has a zombie crawl is really appealing to me. And maybe I just go and watch. I understand there's a lot. It is a spectator sport, but you can participate as well. I might want to watch the first year, and then maybe we go back and participate in the future. But that's this weekend.
Yeah, that's this weekend. Remind me, when we talk to Aaron Higgins sometime, ask him about the competition he won, creating a zombie film that led him to be on set at The Walking Dead.
Okay. We need to do that. That's interesting.
It's a good story.
Well, anyway, there's a lot of, so you haven't done it, so that's good. So now you need to put it on your list, and we're going to go do that at some point, even if it's when we're 75 years old,
We'll be zombies.
We don't have to dress up much. We look like zombies, but it's Halloween season. There's a lot of that going on this weekend, a lot of haunted houses. The weather's not going to cooperate, I don't think, very much, but it is what it is.
Yep. I'm excited.
Well, listen, also, what we've talked about a couple of times is really what's happening in the industry right now. And heading into November, ocean freight market is anything but stable. Carriers continue to blank sailings pretty aggressively, creating pretty high capacity.
A bunch.
Yeah. Which, what that is doing. And what I'm seeing, as of this week, West Coast rates are creeping up. They're projected to hit around $3,100. East Coast $4,000. Gulf right in that range. Intermodal points over $5,000. So bookings are being delayed anywhere from 8 to 10 days because of these canceled sailings. So and you're hearing about cargo rolls and all this that I'm saying. It really probably is not surprising to most BCOs who are in the mix of it right now. And this has happened before, this is not too isolated, but it's definitely challenging times for these BCOs.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about any equipment issues or any congestion issues after, post Golden Week and the hurricane impact? Are you hearing anything about that?
No, and I'm glad you bring that up because that's really interesting. You're not hearing and seeing what you typically do about, those of us who have been in the industry as long as we have, September, October, this time frame is when you start seeing, short on chassis, congestion at ports, ships idling at anchor. You're not hearing, you're not seeing any of that. And a little bit of that is, the undertones of that is a lot of the cargo is brought in early. So a lot of the metrics show, for example, the Port of LA, Long Beach, they had record numbers, somewhat of a surge of volume a couple of months ago. And now all ports and terminals are very fluid. There's not a piling up of ships at anchor. Yeah. So this tells us that product is moving through the supply chain, and actually being sold.
Yeah.
In many cases, it's not stockpiling at a warehouse, which that lends itself to what a lot are talking about as a potential resurgence. 2026, the signals are a little murky, but that's exactly what a lot are speculating that could potentially happen in 2026.
Yeah, hearing the same thing too.
Yeah,
hearing the same thing.
So again, challenging times, interesting times, a little bit of what we expect in November, but in certain cases, it's very, very different.
Yeah, yeah. It's been kind of quiet other than that this week, from my perspective, as far as, any big industry news.
Well, that kind of gets us to, I'm excited about our guest for this episode.
Me too, dude. This is a good one.
This one, well, and we always say that, right? But it really is. This one that we just came across, by chance, an event a while back, and made connections, and really like what they're doing here. Really interesting and really, really relevant. So I'll let you kind of take it away from there.
Yeah, right on. Well, I'm super excited about this episode. So today we're going to sit down, or we sat down with Ryan Joyce, who's the CEO and co-founder of GenLogs. They're a freight intelligence platform that's bringing the power of AI and real-time data to the trucking industry. Ryan and his team track commercial trucks coast to coast using a nationwide sensor network, unlocking hidden capacity, combating fraud, and giving shippers and carriers unprecedented visibility into their operations.
Before founding GenLogs, Ryan spent over 15 years in the U.S. intelligence conducting counterterrorism operations across the Middle East. So fascinating.
Yes.
So it's fair to say he knows a thing or two about tracking moving targets. Today, he jokes that he used to track terrorists and now he tracks trucks. On this episode, we dive into how his team is building unbreakable supply chains, tackling $30 billion in freight fraud, and applying intelligence-driven insights to transform the way logistics works in the U.S. All right, Ryan, welcome again to Kev Talks. I've got to ask you, we got to start it off this way, Ryan. After the welcome, you said you used to track terrorists, and now you track trucks. Explain.
Yeah, perfect segue. Perfect start.
That's the whole episode
let's perfect start. Let's get after it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is it's quite a story, but really it harkens back to September 11th. Is before that day, that morning, I didn't care about anything in life beyond just playing basketball, maybe flirting with girls back in high school. September 11th happened, and my dad was actually in the Pentagon that day, and he narrowly was killed in that attack. In fact, the plane hit right underneath his office. He narrowly got out. The whole floor collapsed. And when he got home that night, I gave him a big hug. And as I went to bed, I decided I was going to do everything I could to learn about the history, culture, language, religion of the people that would do that, and make sure it never happened again.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I ended up studying abroad in the Middle East, studied Arabic. And when you have Arabic and you have Middle East understanding and history, there's not a lot you could do back in those post-September 11th days. And at some point, the CIA came knocking and said, hey, we'd like you to come in and start working for us. So I did. I joined the U.S. intelligence community.
Was that an easy decision for you? I'm sorry. Was that when they said, hey, come work for us? Did you immediately go, yeah, or wait a minute?
Well, I frankly had to
think it through at all, right?
Well, I think I had to figure out, hey, was this the CIA what they show in the movies or is a little bit different. And that's really what it came down to. The only thing I knew about the CIA was Jason Bourne and all those types of spy movies. And
that's not real.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, there's elements of it that they definitely want to train you to be observant, to understand if you have surveillance, all the above. But I went to the library the next day and I just got a bunch of books about the CIA written by actual CIA officers to figure out, what do they do? What's the mission? And am I the right fit for this? And I came away from that really saying, yeah, I think this is absolutely what I want to do. And I think if I truly decided to devote myself to make sure that another September 11th never happened again, this seemed like a pretty good agency to do that through. And so I joined. I spent about a decade of my career living in the Middle East, in a lot of different hot zone and conflict areas. And my job was to recruit terrorists to spy on behalf of the United States, to tell us about the plans and intentions of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and a lot of these other bad groups. And what we learned through that whole experience is, when you're dealing with one of these guys early on, you really need to figure out, are they legitimately trying to give us information? Or are they trying to lure us out to kill us?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've had colleagues that have both been killed or seriously injured when that's gone wrong. And so the way we did that was using satellite sensors and other sources of data to tie it all together, to take what we call all source intelligence, to understand, who is this person, what is their motivation, and can we trust them? Now, fast forward to now, and I'm happy to get in the GenLog story, but we basically take all of that background methodology and the whole playbook that the CIA used. We now run that against domestic trucking to verify that someone you are dealing with is legitimate and you can trust them and they're not trying to defraud you. So that's how we kind of developed that tagline that we used to track terrorists. Now we track trucks.
Yeah. I have 10,000 more questions. Higgins, if you have them, you better go, because I have 10,000 more questions.
No, I think it's just absolutely fascinating. And, and seeing what you guys are doing and how you're doing that. And of course, with everything that's going on, and unfortunately we've had some tragedy in the trucking industry in the past week. It's getting a lot of national attention, and I think it's just fascinating. I know that couldn't have been an easy decision, but kudos to you, and thank you for serving our country and providing that level of intelligence. And so I just want to say thanks, man. We could have a whole episode where I just kind of pick your brain and talk about different things. But
edit all of it out.
I think that
edit it down to an hour, but we're going to.
So thank you for your service, and thanks for being on here and bringing us up to speed on what you guys are doing with GenLogs.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the GenLogs. I want to get to the GenLogs genesis, but before we do, just back to your days in the CIA. Have you written this stuff down? Are you writing a book? Is there going to be a movie of you? Surely you're documenting some of this, right?
So much of it is right up here, and it's going to stay up in my head, mostly because, we joke about it. Like, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. And so much of what I did was classified, and it'll frankly never see the light of day. And the little bit that I can, and I did have to go through the CIA to get approval to even, first of all, say that I was in the CIA. And second of all, share some stories. And but man, they were, they're really strict, and rightfully so, about what you can say and not, because these were real human lives that we were dealing with. That when I would recruit these foreigners to spy on behalf of the United States, like, they were putting their trust and faith in me to say I was going to keep them safe. And that's an oath that I really feel strongly to both. I gave an oath to the Constitution, but I also gave an oath to these, what we called human assets or agents, that I would protect them beyond the duration of my time in CIA. And a lot of them are still out there doing good work. And so, I could basically admit that I was in the CIA. I can't tell you where I served. I can't tell you what I did exactly. And there's some parameters there. But as much as I can, I'd love to share, because I also think the CIA does great work. And if anyone's listening to this and thinking, I'm interested in serving in national security, you absolutely should check it out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, what you said is, learning Arabic and kind of that path that led you into that. I had somebody that I know whose child was going to college and, studying certain subjects and taking Arabic and interested in, and it was, I don't know, months before they got a call. So it's, it's interesting what kind of sets those things in motion.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole process to get in. I mean, we're talking about psychological testing, medical testing, polygraphs, and everything. So those that do get in, I was privileged to work among truly the best of the best, people that spoke multiple languages, had lived in foreign countries, truly understood and could permeate into a culture to the point that they could, tell the best jokes in, let's say, Egypt, and all the Egyptians would just go cracking up because they truly understood that culture. And really, there's some of that DNA I've brought into GenLogs, because the founding team of GenLogs actually has zero background in trucking, zero background in logistics. So it was a whole culture and a whole industry that we had to learn from scratch. And it was really helpful to take the same way that I would land in a foreign country and understand after a few weeks or months who's who, the movers and shakers, how the power dynamics work. That's how we had to learn this industry as well.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to get into GenLogs, but one more question about your days. And can you share anything high level? I'm so interested in, Higgins and I in our career have done significant amount of negotiations for contracts. What was your approach? Like you said, you were negotiating in a way with terrorists, trying to, get them on the other side. What was your high level? What was your approach? Maybe not giving, things that are proprietary, obviously, but high level, what was that like?
Yeah, it really comes down to, especially when you're dealing with humans, and this gets into negotiations as well, you need to know what motivates that other party. And at the end of the day, it was all about human psychology and motivations on why would someone want to either turn on their own Al-Qaeda comrades or give us secret information. And there's a lot of reasons why people might want to do that, from monetary reasons, could be reasons of revenge. They could have an ideological reason. And frankly, I dealt with terrorists that had gotten recruited into this whole Al-Qaeda mess when they were really young. And at some point they were like, what are we doing? We're killing men, women, and children. And ideologically, it just kind of snapped for them that this is not right. And I'm now in deep here. How do I get out? And they were looking for that lifeline. But I think at the end of the day, whether it's negotiations in a boardroom or negotiations with a human to spy on behalf of the United States, you got to understand, like, what makes them tick? What do they want out of this? And what is the leverage that we have that we could pull to say, hey, I can help you get out of Al-Qaeda. I can help, put your kids through college. I could help you get back at this Al-Qaeda leader that wronged you a while ago, and play to those motivations to say, here's the pathway, though, where we can both get what we want. And that's ultimately where the best situations were within CIA. And I was really proud of the fact that we never coerced, we never blackmailed, we never used sex. Like, we never did these things that the movies might actually show. Instead, these were voluntary relationships where a foreign entity, terrorist, or senior government official inside of Russia or Iran would say, you know what, I have a pathway to get information to the CIA and a reason to do so. And then we would basically have those relationships start.
So what I didn't hear you say was that you walked in and said, I'm the 900-pound gorilla, and so you're going to give me what I want.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, truly, often it was almost always just me out on the streets and me in a restaurant sitting across another human saying, like, yes, I do have ties to US intelligence, or maybe even telling them, like, look, I'm in the CIA and there's a lore that comes with that. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with Ryan, and Ryan is interested in getting this information back to make sure that we keep men, women, and children safe, make sure 9/11 doesn't happen again. I would tell them my story. Like, hey, I'm here because a few guys flew planes into the Pentagon, into the Twin Towers, and I want to make sure that never happens again. And you're in a position to help us make sure that doesn't. But yeah, we had a full contingent of agencies. The entire intelligence community was somewhat at our disposal. And yet when rubber met the road, it was me sitting across from another human trying to talk to them about why them providing us information was ultimately in their best interest, or the US or the world's best interest.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be learned there from just a negotiation perspective, KP. And I know that's why you asked that question, because
it is.
We've both seen what the long-term implications are when you walk into a room and say, I'm the 900-pound gorilla. You give me what you want, because it never works out. It's never mutually beneficial long term. So I only have one more question. Did you ever jump a motorcycle off a cliff and deploy a parachute to get away from somebody?
That was what we called a Tuesday in the CIA.
Yes.
No, man, Tom Cruise is in a league of his own. And and he did all the stuff that we maybe like wish that was every day in the CIA, but truly wasn't. It was a lot about, detecting, are you under surveillance? And if not, then you go to meet this person, you get information, you keep them safe, and then you type up that information and you get that satisfaction knowing that the next day, the president of the United States read a report that you collected from this human source and you put on that president's desk so that U.S. policy was changed. And that's really like, some people would actually look at the day-to-day and be like, wow, there's not a ton of excitement here. And yet the excitement was knowing that the U.S., whether it was negotiations with Iran or whether it was figuring out how we're going to deal with China and Taiwan, I mean, that all comes down to intelligence information that's not public that we're collecting.
Yeah.
Well, no doubt, Ryan, you are the popular guy at a dinner party with stories, I am sure. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing what you did. But I definitely want to get now, kind of to the GenLogs. And how is it that you decide you're exiting CIA? What made you, where was the genesis story of GenLogs, and what made you go into supply chain out of all things that you could do?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the short answer there is I knew that there was an entrepreneurial side of me that wasn't quite being scratched within the big US government. And even as agile as CIA is, and they work with really small teams and you can come up with solutions, there was a part of me that I said, I really want to build something from scratch. And so I decided I didn't have all the knowledge about how to start a company myself. So one of my former colleagues at CIA actually had a startup and offered to have me come in and work for him. So I went out to this company, which was in the computer vision space, focused on looking at security cameras in malls and shopping centers. It started more as a loss prevention company, but then it got really big into the data analytics for retail. So imagine being able to watch when someone walks into a mall and what they do in that entire mall, and then aggregating that skill to get these really rich analytics about how people shop and move.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happened that one of our investors was Ross Perot Jr., who's big in the logistics space and operates a lot of warehouses across the US. And at one of our meetings, he said, what you guys are doing on people is really interesting. Could you do that on trucks? And there was like a pause in the room. And my CEO, rightfully so at the time, said, sir, in all due respect, we could, but we're going to continue to focus on people, retail, all of that. And I just logged that in the back of my head to say, why would someone like Ross Perot Jr. want to collect more data on trucks? Like, I've never thought about how the clothes that I'm wearing, the water that I'm drinking, the food that I'm eating, how it gets to my door. Never had put a thought into that supply chain piece. So when I finally decided that I gathered enough understanding of how a company, a startup operates and this and that was like, what's going to be the idea? And I went back to what Ross Perot Jr. said about collecting better data on trucks. And I just started to do a ton of conversations with different CEOs, whether they were in freight brokerages or actual carriers or this and that, trying to understand like, what is this trucking industry? And that's where my eyes were open to see how fragmented this industry is, how fragmented the data on trucks out there are, but also how all of that data fragmentation and frankly, lack of visibility caused the rise of what we now know to be double brokering, fraud, theft, this whole issue that the industry was grappling with in that 2022, 2023 timeframe when I was looking at what to do next. And I remember thinking, the parallels between us having to vet a terrorist and now see, is this truck truly able to carry my cargo or my load, or are they potentially going to defraud and steal from me? There was such big parallels there. And I remember back in one of these conflict zones where I was serving, when I was in the CIA, we had these huge screens in this operations center where we literally had drone footage streaming in live. So if you told a terrorist to be at a certain place at a certain time, you could just look up at the screen and see with these drones circling overhead, did he show up? Was he actually following instructions? Does he have access to the terrorist training camps or whatever? And I said, if we could actually take that same way that we collected data on terrorists back in the day using computer vision, using drones, using all of this, and apply that ubiquitously across the United States, that would solve a lot of these problems. And that is where the idea of GenLogs was truly born.
All right. So in a fifth grade level explanation, kind of walk us through exactly, what it does. More importantly, what data is it capturing? And you've touched on it a little bit, but then also the benefits that you see for shippers, brokers, and carriers.
Sure. So what we do at GenLogs is we've actually spent millions of dollars, blood, sweat, and tears to put an entire national network of cameras along all major interstates, freight lanes, highways that are exclusively focused on commercial vehicles and mostly trucks as they pass by. So
Can
each one of our
speeding, can you send a speeding ticket to me because of that?
We are not getting into that. So we decided, hey, we're not trying to, if a carrier is going a few miles over the speed limit, we want to make sure people are safe on the roads, but that's not the reason we collect this data. The reason we collect this data is because we can essentially put every truck in America at a time and place, and do that at a certain scale that if you are not operating a truck on the roads, so you are what is known in the industry as a potential double broker, where you're saying, hey, I want access to a load that was posted on a load board, but you don't actually have any equipment out there that could even haul it. We're going to be able to flag that as a red flag, saying, hey, we don't see you as a truck carrier actually out on the roads anywhere. Or more importantly, and this is really where the use cases come into, freight brokerages across the US, and that it's a huge industry. There's 26,000 of them. It's a $160 billion industry. They have traditionally had to employ armies of carrier sales reps to pick up the phones each day and call lists of carriers and ask them 4 basic questions. Hey, where are you based? What are your preferred lanes? What type of equipment do you have? And where are your trucks right now? And what we realized is that if you build enough of a national network of these cameras, we could answer all 4 of those questions every single day in real time. And so now, instead of a carrier sales rep having to pick up a phone in the morning to start calling a list of carriers, they can actually flip it on its head and look at a load that they need to move and say, hey, which one of my carriers are in the Dallas area that have a dry van that likely need to get back to Chicago? And now I'm going to go ahead and call this small list of 5 instead of a list of 200 to try to see where they are.
Right.
And so we provide this living, breathing map of where all trucks are in the United States that can not only serve freight brokers, but you think about the extension to commercial auto insurance. And that's really where we're breaking into now. And getting back to some of those issues with regards to the crashes that we've made national news recently, some of those dealt with hours of service violations, where the actual truck drivers were exceeding their allowable driving limits. And that's actually really clear in our data, that if I saw you 17 hours ago in one part of the country and 17 hours later, you're still driving out there, you are just violating what the limits are put out there for a safety reason. And not only does law enforcement want to know that, but insurance underwriters would love to know that too, because that's a ticking time bomb that someday that's going to catch up to that company, that trucking company, and they're going to be dealing with some catastrophic crash or whatnot. And so if you just kind of think about, hey, if you had God mode insights into what all trucks were doing at any times on the roads, how valuable would that be? And what the industries that would actually want that data, that's exactly where we're selling into.
Yeah, I'm thinking, where were you in the 90s?
My gosh.
Right, Higgins?
Yeah.
That's definitely a problem that you definitely have a solution for. But let's talk a little bit about, what about fraud and theft? That's a $30 billion problem in the U.S. trucking industry today. What are the biggest trends you're seeing there?
Well, some of the biggest trends we're seeing is, frankly, all of that fraud and theft almost exclusively is happening on what's known as the load boards. And so for those that aren't in this industry or haven't dealt with it, maybe from a freight brokerage perspective, when a shipper needs to move something, a lot of those cargo or those lanes are contracted out to known carriers, and they're going to reliably run those. But then a small subset of it, about 15 to 20% of all of the trucks that are on the roads right now in the US are carrying what's known as spot freight, or basically someone needed to move this right now and they just said, hey, who can move it? And it's not something that's contracted. And where a lot of that those matches happen are on public load boards. Imagine Craigslist, where you just kind of say, hey, I need to get something from Chicago to Dallas. And a truck company says, well, you know what? I'll take it from Chicago to Dallas. The issue that we're seeing, and one of the trends that's kind of rising, is where legitimate truck carriers, their emails or some types of communication mechanisms are actually getting hacked. So there's a phishing attempt against their email. Someone gets access to their passwords, and then they, posing as their account, goes on some of these load boards and basically says, yeah, we'll move it. And they get the load assigned to them. And at that point, in a best case scenario, they just turn around and give it to some other carrier, and they take the difference that they're able to mark it up for. But in a worst case scenario, that fictitious trucking company actually shows up to the shipper location with the impersonated motor carrier number and name on the side of their truck. And they take possession of this load, and then it disappears. And we're actually seeing this happening more and more, where physically trucks are on the roads that have the motor carrier number of another carrier. They're totally fraudulent. They're impersonating, and they're gaining access to these shipper facilities. The gate guard just looks at it and says, hey, we're expecting Acme Trucking. This is Acme Trucking. And then boom, that load disappears.
Wow.
So how are you guys getting, other than cameras, are you getting any satellite imagery on locations or anything else like that, Ryan? So what I'm thinking, KP, if we harken back to as you said earlier, which God, I feel so old, man. I'm telling you.
When I said that, I'm like,
yeah. But I remember, we had a facility, and I had somebody tell me, like, you got 1,100 containers parked out this facility. They're tearing down the gates and all that kind of stuff in order to just park containers all over the desert. Is that something that you guys have visibility of? If I said, hey, I want to look at this location, it's my location, and I contract with you, I want to look at this location and I want to see if I got 1,100 containers out there. Is that capability that you guys have?
It is actually now. Putting our own camera system out there was just the beginning. And we use that as what we know and as what we say is our ground truth foundational data layer. Yeah. From that, we actually tie in a whole lot of different data sources that correlates to our own data sets. And one of those now is satellite imagery. So we're taking in, 500,000 different shipper locations and looking at satellite imagery and tying that in with what we're observing in our own data, and then tying it to telematics data and factoring data and bringing it all together to have like a truly holistic view of what's happening out in the roads and at shipper facilities. And that's a whole nother side to what we do, primarily for freight brokers, but also for shippers as well, is we've been able to ascertain the actual lanes, trucking lanes coming in or out of any facility in the United States. So if you can imagine, just in our user interface, clicking on a Walmart or a Pepsi facility and then seeing, hey, what are the truck volumes that they have going from Wichita down to Dallas or from Los Angeles up to Oregon. And we actually show you that. It's a way to, therefore, for freight brokers to prospect for those shippers. It's also a way for shippers to look at a network, which is really like, if you kind of think about it, like Pepsi has
100%.
Hundreds of locations everywhere. And for them to visualize like, hey, where might there be better network optimization? Yeah. And where are we putting 10 loads a day this way? And then we have 10 loads from one of our vendors coming this way. We actually see that in our data. And we've approached some of these shippers to say, you should be running backhauls on these lanes. For some of your vendors should actually be dropping off like the actual aluminum cans at a Pepsi facility and then taking 2 loads of Pepsi finished product back the other direction. Yep. And that becomes really clear when you take all of that data at scale.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, like, I had a consulting project a couple of years ago where, I was looking at a network optimization for some folks, and I took all of their data and manually created spider maps on all their inbound and all their outbound. So I'm just imagining like, and I had people inside that organization tell me that's not right, and I'm like, I'm looking at the data, right? So I'm just imagining like how awesome that would be to say, okay, here's the 17 locations I need to take a look at. I need to see the inbound volume and the outbound volume. Boom, boom. Let me see it. And it's real and it's awesome. I mean, it just saves a lot of time. And I just thinking like network optimization would be an incredible use of that tool.
Yeah. So Ryan, that gets me to the next question really is, how does someone get access to that data? Like if I wanted to get access to it today, is it a subscription? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question.
It is. That's a great question. It is an annual subscription to our platform. We have different modules that not everyone needs to know what are the volumes coming in and out of ports and what are those lanes or from intermodal ramps, rail ramps. So you kind of like, once you get a demo with us, we'll show you everything. And then you could say, you know what, don't need this, but I do need this and I want this. Okay. And then you just pay on an annual basis to get access to all of the data that you want. And it's kind of tiered by, hey, are you a really small brokerage that's only going to use it a handful of times? Or are you like the C.H. Robinson or J.B. Hunts of the world, where you're going to have thousands of people in this all the time? And trust me, they have been. We've had, over the last just 90 days, we've had 500,000 searches in our data platform from across our different customers.
Wow.
And so it's heavily used. We see that grow, the volume of those searches growing over time. And it's everything from trying to find who are the right carriers to carry on these lanes, what shippers have volume on these lanes, all the way down to, hey, I need to find this asset that is missing. And I had a trailer 1, 2, 3, 4. It was never returned. We don't know who had it. We don't know where it is. Back in the day, you would just have to wait until a police officer standing on the side of the road. Now you can literally put, hey, I'm Acme Trucking and I'm missing trailer 1, 2, 3, 4. You set an alert in our system. And next time that is seen out in the roads, we will immediately email you with, here it is, who's hauling it. And then if we need to, we'll also work on behalf with law enforcement to recover that.
Yeah. KP, I think that's where that was like the first example that we saw at the plug and play event, right? Where they were talking about locating a trailer that'd been missing for however long, right? So I'm like, my wheel, like, talk to me about chassis. Are you guys doing anything in the chassis space yet? Working with the chassis providers, because that has been a huge issue for chassis providers and for customers.
Yeah, we now collect all container numbers and chassis numbers off of whatever we're seeing on the roads. And a few months ago, we actually had the first U.S. Port of Miami, have us put our sensors at their gates. And now we're moving to the next port in Florida. And we're kind of domino effect both at ports and at the rail yards of getting our cameras right at the gates so that every container or chassis that enters or exits is being logged. Yeah. And you can then know, hey, it exited the Port of Miami gates. We saw it on 95 at this point. We saw it again here, and really start to get passive tracking of assets out there on the roads to tie together, like, where's stuff moving and where is it? And I want to be alerted. That's the exact use case we're driving for.
So Ryan, do you have a rollout plan to be in all U.S. ports by X date?
Part of it, look, we would do it tomorrow if all U.S. ports said, let's go. And as each one is, we're prioritizing making sure we have the teams and the equipment to get out there. It absolutely is a desire of ours to be at all, like, let's roughly 360 ports here as quickly as possible. But you know, some ports are more forward leaning than others, and we're showing the value to the ports themselves. Say, hey, we're going to give you visibility in what happened, what the dwell times are, what the demurrage, like all of that. We're going to now give you insights, but more importantly, we're going to tell you where is the cargo from your port actually moving inland, and where is cargo coming through other ports moving into your area, where those BCOs might be better served to bring that cargo in through your port. Like huge business opportunities that are right at your door, where someone's bringing in through the Port of Oakland and bringing it down to the Port of Los Angeles area. They should just be coming in through the Port of Los Angeles.
So Ryan, is there a perceived disadvantage of a port not wanting to engage with GenLogs and have access to that information?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's a perceived disadvantage. What we're seeing is that the 3PLs, freight forwarders, and others, even the BCOs themselves, they really appreciate when they have greater granularity into what's happening at a port. Yep. And that is to the port's advantage to have that better visibility that they're providing to say, hey, you can get better data on what the chassis, where they are, containers, all of that. And the ports that don't have it, then all of a sudden don't become the ports of choices when those freight forwarders and BCOs are trying to decide, where do we want to start to bring this in?
Yeah, that's why I ask it that way. Like if there's not a disadvantage, is there a perceived one? If there's not a disadvantage, what's preventing the rollout from happening faster?
I think part of it is just frankly visibility of what is GenLogs and what do we do. Right. And we're still trying to get the word out. In fact, just the other day, we were at an event in Los Angeles and met the director of the Port of Los Angeles. And he was like, hey, what is GenLogs? And we were like, all right, clearly we need to tell this story. So I do appreciate the opportunity to get on, Kev Talks here to make sure that we're getting the word out.
We will do that part. Yes, absolutely.
The other part is I just think people are still in this. Privacy is a really big component to, I think, folks. And we're really trying to stress that, hey, we do not collect data on private vehicles. We do not collect data on the drivers of trucks. We collect data that a truck was at a time and place. If I sat a human at your gate, at your port gate, they'd be able to see everything that our cameras are seeing and nothing more. And so since there's no expectation of privacy in a public roadway, we're trying to walk people through how this can be done responsibly in a way that doesn't degrade their customers' privacy, but it actually provides better granularity for those customers, that they become happier customers using your port because of the increased visibility that you give them.
Well, go ahead, KP.
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to lie to you. I think I lied to you. I am going to get to every question that I have on my list because this is so fascinating to me. But you had some big name early adopters. What resonated with those early adopters?
Yeah, it was a fascinating time for us as a company because we still didn't have anyone that came from the supply chain space when we first launched our product a year ago in August of 2024. So we had these 10 early adopters. Some of them were Echo, NFI, ArcBest, some big names in the industry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we put this into their hands and we gave them 60 days to evaluate it and decide, did they want to have it for the next year or not? Now talk about like someone like Echo. It's like the 5th largest freight brokerage in the US. Like they have enormous amount of data that they sit on themselves. And when that 60 days came to an end, all 10 of them said, yep, we want this. And they became annual customers. And even better is all 10 of them just renewed for the second year this month in August. And what I think is important there is they would all say to a T that GenLogs it's not even a contest. We just have the most data on what trucks are doing out there and what shippers are doing out there. And they can't piece it together from themselves. They can't find it anywhere else. And one statistic to kind of give you that I think puts this into relief here. A while ago, it's about a year ago, I was talking with some executives at Samsara, and I just asked them the question, hey, what is your market penetration in the US? Yeah. And back then they said it's about 7%. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow, like that's crazy that Samsara is like a $35 billion company with just 7% of market share. And it just shows you how large trucking is and how fragmented it is. And yet, so they see about 7% of fleets that are on the roads. GenLogs on a regular basis sees over 85% of for-hire fleets that are operating on the roads. And it's really a big question to us, whether that remaining like 14%, are they just sitting out this market because the rates are so bad?
Right.
And I really don't think we're missing much. So essentially we're giving you a full snapshot on a daily basis of where trucks are and what they're doing in a way that Samsara, Motive, some of these other telematics guys could never aggregate all in one place.
That's a phenomenal statistic. That's absolutely amazing. I got KP, you got a lot of questions. I'm developing a lot of questions.
Okay.
So we talked about,
jump in, brother.
We talked about chassis. I want to back up for a second. So Ross Perot Jr., investor in the company you worked for before you logged this idea, and now you've created GenLogs. Did you go back to Ross Perot Jr. and say, I'm going to do this, and would you like to be a part of it?
So hopefully they don't kill me for saying this, but I did. And the investment arm under Ross Perot Jr. said, this is such an insane idea. We don't think it's going to work. Like the execution risk was too high to say that we were going to put these sensors all over coast to coast. And fast forward a year ago, and now I'm like, actually,
let's bring him on as a guest.
Yeah, let's call him.
I've become good friends with a lot of the guys in that office, and they kind of joke now. It's under the Perot Jane investment entity, and they kind of joke like, man, we totally missed it. We just didn't think you guys would be able to do it. And I said, you guys, we're the same team that went after and like, you know, helped get bin Laden out there. Like, how did you not think we were going to be able to do this domestically?
Touche, right?
And it's really now, like, you fast forward 2 years later, and we have hundreds and hundreds of these sensors across the US, going to thousands here pretty soon, from California to New York, from Minnesota down to Miami, and everywhere in between. Every second that I snap my finger here, we're collecting about 1,000 data points across our network on trucks.
Wow.
It's that much data that's now coming in. And so now the Ross Perot Jr. entity, like, we actually have something to go sell to them to say, 4 years ago, you asked for better data on trucks, and now we have it. And so we are doing some projects with them when it comes to looking at trucking patterns, specifically with logistics areas and warehouses.
Yeah. Right on. Now, follow-up question, or second question, what about truck parking? Because it is a big issue. A lot of people out there doing things, truck parking club. There's, in Vosse Landside, which used to be Secure Space, and other people like that are giving platforms for drivers to find parking. Are you engaged in that at all? I don't know if you saw Evan from Truck Parking Club posted an article the other day, and he's like, we don't have a supply problem. We have an access problem, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of supply out there. They're just not being used. So how do you see GenLogs participating in that?
Well, first of all, I'll say that Evan Shelley over at Truck Parking Club has become one of my very great friends in this industry. So I respect everything that they're doing there. And we often talk about how some of our data could help with what they're trying to fix and tackle it together. Just last week, I was actually in the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters meeting with some of the deputy undersecretaries there about where our data might be able to plug in. And truck parking came up as one of the core areas that they're concerned about, right alongside fraud and theft, as well as some of the B1 visa and cabotage issues that we're seeing. So we're confident that our data can give them a better understanding of what specific numbers of trucks are coming down certain lanes, what are those MCs or DOTs, and then where do we see them parking, and how do we need to plan better in the future? I just think that what Truck Parking Club is doing is actually freeing up this access, like you said, in a much better and coherent way than we're going to be able to solve it. We're going to be able to provide data that's going to tell us directionally what we need to do as a nation. Mm-hmm. And they're the boots on the ground, like actually providing those safe and affordable places for truckers to park.
Yeah. I can see where that'd be a great relationship, because you'll know where the parking needs to be based on the data, and then they can go source the people that have that space and give the drivers the access to it. So,
yeah. All right. So shiny object segment, AI. That's what everybody's talking about. So with AI and sensors really at the core of GenLogs, what's the long-term vision?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what we've kind of seen recently with some of the larger logistics service providers in the space is AI is the shiny object. And a lot of them have gone out and they've tried different AI agent companies, and some of them will even grab them and be like, great, we're going with you. And they'll sign a contract to do X numbers of calls or credits or however they work. And then they turn to that AI provider and say, great, who are you going to call? And the AI provider says, I don't know. Who do you want me to call? And so it's all of a sudden you've just replaced a human with an AI agent that is also having the same issue that those carrier sales reps had, which is, do we really just want to call down the line of all of these lists of carriers and see where their trucks are and where they want to take it? And this is where my whole thesis now is GenLogs is going to help make those AI agents smart. Whether we do it ourselves or not, I haven't even thought that far out. But what I do know is that I can tell an AI agent who exactly are the top 5 carriers they should call in order to book this load. Mm-hmm. And now you can almost hunt with a sniper rifle instead of a shotgun. Yeah. And you're going to be able to make 5 calls to book a load, which at about 19 to 20 cents per call, $1 to book a load, like that's a great deal. And then we can essentially make what is the AI processes, an AI agent calling, smarter by providing them ground truth data so they know who to call at that time.
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, beyond trucking now, is there application, maritime, air, rail?
There is, and this is something when we look long-term at where GenLogs is in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, the reason we started with trucking is because that is the most difficult piece of this whole puzzle to put
I was going to say, that's easy, right? Let's start there.
Right. Yeah. And
It's not.
The Project 44s of the worlds or the Forkites of the worlds, like they often started with, hey, let's start with the maritime piece, because between AIS beacons and a lot of the public data of where a Maersk ship is, you kind of know where it is at any given point. And you're going to have all of these containers that are on that ship. So you're getting a huge bang for your buck when 1,000 containers are all in one place, and then you just know it is. But man, the moment that hits the port and those 1,000 containers shotgun into a bunch of cross-dock and transloading facilities, and then 53-foot containers parcel that out even more and start bringing that even more inland, that's where the headache is. And we're like, let's solve the biggest headache first. And then, man, we could bolt on where the planes in the sky are, thanks to ADS-B beacons, the ships, thanks to AIS, the trains. You could start to now truly map out once you've solved the trucking piece of this.
Okay. Well, I think that's great, because I was going to ask the question. I'm glad KP let us in there, but like, port to, if container drayage, right? Port to door container drayage. I got a container coming from the Port of Long Beach, Port of Los Angeles, going to Salt Lake City. It may go on the rail. It may be drayed completely. You guys have that capability now that could plug in, because it's a black hole for a lot of people. I mean, you may use Project 44 or Forkites or something like that, but you got to go to those individual service providers to get those API plugins and everything else in order to get that domestic visibility. So is that a capability that you guys have today if somebody wanted to plug in?
It is a nascent capability, I would say, and we've just kind of rolled that out to some of our customers that allow them to put essentially, hey, I'm looking for this. When you see it, alert me. We can update whatever that tracking capability is. But that's ultimately the vision here. The beauty about the GenLogs system is that it is absolutely permissionless. No one has to click a button to say, I'm allowing you to go ahead and collect data on this container, chassis, truck, whatever it might be. We just collect it. And so when we get a certain...
I'm sorry, Ryan, do you think that will always be the case? Do you see any changes in that? Any type of legislation that will lock down anything in that regard?
Well, I can't imagine.
Okay.
No, we don't, because there's a variety of reasons why we believe like we're in a good space there. If you actually think about it, like our sensors are static. There are sensors on the road that are mobile, and those are called autonomous vehicles. And if you're going to actually shut down the ability to collect on what is surrounding a car, which could be a truck and a container and all of this number, you shut that down, you're now shutting down autonomous vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so there's just no expectation of privacy in a public roadway. And I think legislation's actually in our favor to say, hey, if you're out there, GenLogs can collect what that container number is. And since
they can write you a speeding ticket, they can give you a toll ticket, they can do all those things without ever asking you those questions. So we should have access to that data.
Do you know that firsthand, Higgins? Is that what you're saying?
Okay. I have some experience in that.
I thought you did.
Here's a toll. Well, I think, Ryan, we should have a separate discussion about some of that container drayage stuff. So we'll take that offline. I guess some ideas I want to bounce off of you.
Sounds great.
Don't laugh at me, KP. I'm taking advantage of our own podcast.
So Ryan, let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the leadership lessons from your time in the Middle East and even the U.S. intelligence world. How has that carried over into how you operate and run GenLogs today?
Yeah, what I would say is there were times in my CIA career where we were considered the pointy end of the spear, where I was outside of an embassy. I was living in a house at the pointy edge of a terror conflict. And when we were there, the communication from the top about why we were there and what was our mission and what we should do and how were things going was so critical. So when you feel really far out there and you almost feel alone, having someone consistently deliver a message was so critical. And there was one leader at the CIA later in my career who was well known for every week writing this really lengthy email about everything that was going on in this specific geographic area that he covered and sending that out to everyone. And man, when that hit your inbox, the entire room went quiet as everyone was reading through that. And I've carried that into my leadership at GenLogs. By every Monday morning at 7 a.m., I send out what has now become like a 10-page update on what's going across the country, the company. Where are we with regards to customers and what's going on in the customer success piece? What are the investigations we're doing with law enforcement? And how does this all tie into the big strategic picture of where we're trying to go with GenLogs? And what consistently I've heard as feedback from the team is this is the most transparent company they've ever been a part of. Everyone knows what is happening inside the company. Everyone knows down to the dollar how much money we have in our bank account, how much money we're bringing in from our customers, what investors are thinking and sharing with me, and what happens even in our board meetings. I report that out verbatim to the team. It's that level of transparency and communication that I feel like is how great organizations are set apart.
So I guess you're saying I can't subscribe to that newsletter.
I was thinking the same thing. Can we get the Monday morning update?
Get on that list. I'll let you on my list. If we get on that list, that's really good. I think that's at the core. That's so important, and that's awesome that you're doing that. And the person that did that you referenced, they probably didn't know, how important it was, or how that lesson will be cascaded to you and your team.
Yeah.
Everyone at GenLog, they will replicate that. Not everybody, but the right ones will.
Yeah. And there's a great lesson there. So KP, I'm sure you have a couple more questions, but Ryan, I want to ask you, like, how, as two industry veterans who've been doing this for a long time, how can we help you? I mean, besides being on the podcast, where would you be looking for, somebody like KP and I to help you guys?
Well, what I'll say right now is that when we look at where GenLog's customer base is, about 90% are freight brokers still. It's a really hot area for us. We sit there with data that helps shed light on where the shippers, what they're up to, and the carriers that they're up to. And that's literally what brokers want to be able to see. Mm-hmm. But where we want to go next, and where we believe we can do a whole lot more, is with the shippers themselves, with the BCOs. Mm-hmm. That's where we see both expansion on our side and where we probably have the most to learn. So Kevin, when you talked about that network optimization play that you did and had to manually do that, man, we would love to sit down with a shipper over the course of a month or two and work with them on understanding, hey, what do your network? I mean, we could show them what their networks are. So it's not even like they need to give us any data, but more importantly, start to look at, hey, how do we align your RFPs and make sure that we are capturing the right carriers that you're inviting? We're also looking at who your vendors are to see that how many loads are coming from vendors where those carriers should be taking backhauls directly back from you a few times a week. Like, we really want to sit down and map that out. And I think the early adopters of this will find that we are talking in like the 8 figures of savings that we are going to directly deliver into them next year with the data that we're sitting on. So that's what I would say, both through this podcast and through your networks, trying to get the word out to say, hey, if there's a BCO or a shipper listening that runs a transportation team that's getting ready to gear up for their quarterly or their biannual RFP right now and wants to see what GenLog's data has and how that could help it, we would love to chat.
Is there an optimal size of a business? I'm sure this is applicable to just about anybody, but is there an optimal size of business that this could be used by?
What I would say, I would almost say like the bigger and the thornier, the better, because the more convoluted it is to.
We know some big ones. Yeah.
As Lex, I mean, we're in some talks with some of the bigger ones right now, and I would say like nothing is scary to us because we're sitting currently on billions of data points on these shippers themselves, and I guarantee we know more about them than they probably are even aware of themselves. Yeah. And so when you're really small, you might not have the pain points that you do when you scale to that very large organization. And you're talking multiple facilities with multiple different carrier relationships. And you're trying to figure out like, hey, if we can move the needle 1% in terms of optimization, that's tens of millions of savings. Yeah. That's the type of shipper that we're actually looking to come in and deal with.
Yeah. God, this is fascinating.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start trying to wrap it up a little bit, but this has been really, really good. From your perspective, give some advice to entrepreneurs that are trying to bring new technology into what I'll call, an old school industry like trucking.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was using those same lessons that I learned when I was at the CIA is you got to listen. And in my meetings with potential assets or agents, the ratio of me speaking to listening was about 10 to 90%. So I did 90% of my time was just sitting there listening to why that person joined Al-Qaeda, why they want to change their ways. I just sat there and listened. I asked questions to draw out a little bit more. And when you're going into a new industry, or even if you've been in the industry a while and you think you know how it works, I think the ones that are going to potentially be set up for failure are those that they do all the speaking. Hey, the reason we're going to build this for you is this is going to do this and this is going to do this. And instead, flipping it on its head and walking in an organization with humility and not being that 900-pound gorilla, as we talked about earlier, to say, hey, what's the most pressing issue going on? And what is that? And can I ask some clarifying questions about that? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? That is the quickest way to get to what the most acute pain point is and the potential clear solution that you can now go and build. And that's what customers at the end of the day want. They're bringing their pain to you. If you can solve and give them a painkiller, they're going to buy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, this has been really, really good. Where can listeners learn more about GenLog or connect with you? We'll put this in the notes for sure, but tell them how the best way to connect with GenLogs.
Yeah, a great starting point is our website. It's GenLogs, GenLogs.io. At the upper right-hand corner, there's 2 buttons there. And I always say this because we are trying to give back to the industry. One of those buttons is find lost assets. If you're listening and you are missing a trailer, a container, a truck, whatever it might be, you can report that through that portal. Our team will track it down. We'll give you the information. We'll try to get it back in your hands, and we're not going to charge you. So we offer that for free for the entire industry.
Wow.
To the right of that is the book a demo button. And if you want to hit that, that's where one of our team members will show you everything that I talked about today. You'll see it live. And when I say live, you can ask them, hey, can you pull me carriers on this lane? They will literally pull it. They'll tell you where that carrier is right now. So we'll do that. And then you can connect with me on LinkedIn or on X. I'm Ryan Joyce Voice there too. So I'm always interested in chatting with other people that are either in this industry or want to break into it as well.
That's great. Well, listen, this has been fascinating, so interesting. I'm glad we got to talk. We definitely want to do our part in getting the word out, and consider this an invitation for you to come back when you're in all ports and terminals, whenever that may be. I'm in the U.S. Maybe we come back and talk about your journey there. But this has been really, really good. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the listeners in Kev Talks.
Sounds great, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's been great. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.